Welcome to DevJams. This is a time for us to talk with developers who are doing interesting, innovative, inspiring things when it comes to working with images and videos in their projects, whether that's managing them well, whether that's delivering them well, or frankly, maybe even something else that I don't even know about. My name is Sam Brace. I am the Senior Director of Customer Education and Community at Cloudinary. And in this episode, we're going to be bringing back one of our amazing guests from previous episodes. We're going to be talking with Joel Turner, who is a Senior Product Engineer at Sprinklr. And in previous episodes, we focused on his website, the one that he's using to house his projects, be able to share his blog posts. And we showed different ways that he was able to associate Instagram and Cloudinary together to essentially make it easier for him to support that type of Instagram-focused content on his website. Well, he's back, and we're going to talk about the project and some of the things that he's done to revisit that project, as well as things he's added to it, such as cover images, videography, and also new frameworks, such as Astro, and new ways to use the project, such as AWS Lambda. Lots of things are going to be covered in today's episode. But before we get into that, of course, I have to introduce my amazing co-host for these episodes, Jen Brisbane, who is a technical curriculum engineer with me at Cloudinary. So, Jen, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Jen, why are you excited to talk to Joel today?
I'm really excited to have Joel back on DevJams because we've talked a lot about Next.js on a lot of various DevJams episodes that we posted so far. And now we're going to talk about Astro and the reason for the switch from Next to Astro. So I think that's a really interesting topic. It's an increasingly popular framework. So excited to hear from Joel today.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, it's interesting how Astro has popped up along the way with DevJams. I love that we're going to have an episode that's really focused on it again, because looking all the way back to when we had Colby, who is one of our amazing Cloudinary team members when he first started Cloudinary, he showed how he was using his project with Astro. And interestingly enough, Matt Kane, who works at Netlify, when he was showing off some of the work that he's done with his Unpick project in an episode, he also used Astro. So to your point, it is a framework that is popping up quite a bit, and it's good to be able to see how this is all done. So excellent point there. Anything else you're excited about before we segue over to how people can watch future episodes, past episodes, all of that?
I just think it's a good thing for people to look out for that are making blogs, portfolios, landing pages. I think Astro is something that you should look into if you aren't already and you're not building a web app at large scale, maybe using Next. Aside from that, just excited to hear from Joel.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And before we get to Joel, I do want to make sure that we get the chance to be able to talk about where this is, because this may be the first time you're interacting with Cloudinary, maybe the first time you're interacting with Cloudinary podcasts. Note that all podcasts that are done by Cloudinary are going to be at cloudinary.com/podcasts. That's where you can check out episodes of DevJams. And we've been doing this for a few years now, so there are plenty of episodes to dive into. You also will see here that note that all of these various pieces, if you're a YouTube user, that's where we house a lot of the content as well. You also will see that we are actively on Spotify, as well as many of the places you consume podcasts that are probably more common to the audio format, but more places are supporting video, such as podcasts like ours. So definitely feel free to check it out in those spaces. On top of all of this, Joel, as well as many of our guests, are active members on our Cloudinary community. So feel free to check that out at community.cloudinary.com and make sure that you are asking any questions that come up from any of the details about this episode. You might be surprised who answers you. And also, if you are interested, we do actively have a Discord server that Cloudinary runs that is community driven as well. So we'll make sure that you have access to all the links to all those places inside of the show notes and all the links that we're going to be putting out there. But just wanted to emphasize all of that before we get into the episode, in case you're saying, wait, is this the first time you're doing this, or where do I go for more information? There's a lot that you can uncover with all of these various spaces. So with that said, let's bring on our friend, Joel. So Joel, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
So as I mentioned, your previous guest, you also are a senior product engineer at Sprinklr, but obviously you are more than a title, you are more than just a previous guest. So feel free to tell everybody who you are, a little bit more detail about yourself.
Sure. Right now I'm living in Portland, Oregon, where it's nice and icy outside. But yeah, I've been working on the web mainly since 2008. I got into PHP and WordPress and started getting into optimization around then. And that just took me into React days, 2016. And Cloudinary was along for that journey when I still had my site on WordPress, just an easy little plugin that everything sourced from Cloudinary. I was blown away. So that kind of got me hooked, I guess.
Well, it's a good way to get hooked. I got to tell you, it's one of those things where we're still actively involved in the WordPress ecosystem, and I still feel really passionate about it. So it makes sense why it's where you've made this move from content authoring, content development when you're working in this area, content development work, especially when supporting a WordPress site with PHP. But I'd love to know more about the segue. Like, where did you start getting involved with some of these frameworks that are more JavaScript related, frankly, like React? And of course, we're going to talk about Astro, which is in a similar vein. What took you there?
Yeah, Gatsby was the first one that really got me off of WordPress. I still used WordPress for the content, the CMS, but then Gatsby to render it all. But it was more exploration playground sort of thing. I could break my website and nobody would care about me. So that it made it low stakes to really explore new technology and everything. And Gatsby worked really well. I got the itch to start messing around with Next.js, so I switched it over to that. And until recently, I had it on Next.js with the pages router. It was working great. I like to keep my site static. I always do static builds. There's not a whole lot of interactivity on my site. There's just a few small pieces, and I felt like the Next pages router worked well for that. And then just recently, I tried to move it over to the app router and React Server components and that whole thing, and it just couldn't build it statically the way I was hoping it would. So out of frustration, one night I started looking into Astro, and it's been always on my list to check out. I thought, maybe I'll, set up a quick blog example, and everything was just so seamless and easy to get started that just little by little, I started moving everything over to it. Then it ended up taking over within a week for my whole site. So
that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And it definitely shows you went from a proof of concept to like actual production pretty fast. And it says a lot about you as a developer to be able to do that type of transition quickly. But it also probably speaks to the volumes of probably how much you appreciate some of the features that you found of Astro. So I think it'd be great to be able to take a look at the amazing site that you have here and see exactly some of the details about it. Because of course, I'm familiar with the Joel Turner website. I'm sure there are others here that are learning about it for the first time. So walking through what the site's about, being able to show us how it made sense to move to Astro, all that'd be really awesome.
Yeah, definitely. The big pieces that I have that were some of the easiest to move over were my illustration pages, because it's all sourced from Cloudinary to begin with, or at least served from Cloudinary. So I didn't have to do a lot of manipulation there. I could use the same fetching. All I had to do was just put it into a different image tag. Everything else worked really well. And same with the blog. All of my cover images are hosted through Cloudinary. All the internal images I write everything in MDX Markdown. So moving all that over was seamless, having that be outside of my site, which was really nice. Made the whole process switching over. I never had to worry about the images, which was really nice. And actually Astro gives a few pieces that made it easier to optimize already there.
Oh, cool. And also for anyone listening who doesn't know, the illustrations you were just looking at are done by Joel. So that's a cool thing. You have a lot of talents, Joel. We're lucky to have you on here. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, and this is all based on what I was on the last episode for. And really, I use Instagram as a CMS. I tag all the posts that I want to show up on my site with certain tags like JMT featured or whatever it is. And then I have a service is now hosted on Lambda that processes all of those. It fetches all the Instagram posts, splits those hashtags and posts, and then sends that over to Cloudinary based and tags them over there. So when I pull it back into my site, I can pull those specific tags, which is really nice. And that way I can have different collections here of different drawings that are all tagged certain things.
Wow, so cool. And if anyone's interested, feel free to check out the other episode where we dive deeper into that part. And today we're going to focus on a few of the other aspects.
So looking at this now, so we've understood that there was a transition period where you went from Next.js to Astro. And you said that there were certain things that you found to be easier, being able to work with it. I mean, we've highlighted some of the image aspects of it, but what else did you find to be essentially enlightening or different about the experience between what you had with Next and now what you have with Astro?
Yeah, the whole philosophy is really interesting with Astro. It's all static with tiny little islands of interactivity, which at first I wasn't sure how that was going to play. You can bring in other libraries for that interactive layer. I ended up choosing Svelte because I have a few projects in Svelte that I really liked. And so this whole gallery is done in Svelte, all the interactions here. And it made it easier for my brain to kind of partition that stuff off. And Astro almost forces me to be better at determining what's needed on a page and what's not. Like the theme switcher up here is just vanilla JavaScript to handle all that switching. Whereas before, you pretty much have to ship all of React to do a little switcher. Just the way Astro kind of partitions out the script tags and everything made it way easier to just ship what's needed for that little element.
So is that what island architecture is? Like a component island architecture, that's where only the JavaScript is loaded for those components where you need it?
Yep.
Is that's a key feature of Astro or a main reason why you made the switch?
Yep, exactly. The whole site, like the header here, the menu, all of that is static. It's going to stay the same. A very minimal HTML, CSS. And on most pages, you don't even need any framework. This is all just, straight HTML pretty much with some styling. But then anytime you do have the interactive layer, it only loads what's needed for that layer that's in view, which is amazing to me. Feels magical.
And how was that working with Next? So let's just say you didn't switch over. Is it just that all the JavaScript would load upon the page load or anything that was attached to that file?
Yeah, there's definitely some optimizations in Next that make it a little bit lighter. And potentially with React Server components, you can get it into, partial re-rendering, which would be amazing. And honestly, when I had it on the pages router, it was fast. It was exactly what I needed. I just got antsy and wanted to test out something else. And, but yeah, it still ships React, so it rehydrates on the client side.
Well, this is a pretty common thing that I find with developers and their personal sites. I mean, as we said, when we were talking about DevJams, we've been doing this for a few years now, and it's a common theme that comes up when you have a personal website. Being able to say, I'm going to use a new framework or a new programming language or test something out. Typically, I found that developers do it for their own personal brand. And I'd love to know, is that something that you resonate with? Or is it something where you're saying, I'd rather guinea pig it myself and try it out with maybe clients or other maybe bigger projects or things along those lines? What was the thing that said, I want to use Astro versus doing it for somebody else?
Yeah, I used to do it on client sites. I did a lot of small websites and usually it was WordPress. And then as I was learning other things, I was like, oh, you need a cool React site, and realize it's way harder for the client to update that and just makes a mess of maintenance later on. So now I just keep it to my own projects, and I have plenty of side projects that I start up just to explore different ideas and new tech and everything. So I'm able to just kind of create little sandboxes, I guess, But my website is probably the one that I mess up the most, I guess. I have no fear of just completely changing everything.
I think that's great. I think it's really, really great. Frankly, it's something that it makes me happy to see that, developers are willing to risk their own brand identity as much as possible just to say that they took a chance on something. Now, obviously, Astro paid off because it is seem to be working really well. And your site obviously is working as good as it did to the outside public when they're touching it. I'd love to see any details about this. Do you have any code samples or anything that kind of shows any of the differences in how you would work with Astro versus Next, or how you're working with certain aspects inside of your site?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the illustration. I'll quickly show how I'm fetching all these illustrations. It's just using the Cloudinary API, pulling back 800. I don't have more than 800 posts that I've tagged. And then I make sure that I grab the tag, and then I can divvy these up into all these tagged buckets. And these become the collections on the front end. So all of this code stayed the same from Next.js over to Astro, which was really nice. The architecture for both allow for server-side loading of these very easily. The big difference here is I used Svelte to load this whole interactive layer. I wanted to be able to swap between different sizes of images, different amount of columns and collections and everything. So the gallery containers is where all the Svelte stuff happens here. And the nice thing with having all the images through Cloudinary is the URLs don't change. I can just pass those on to whatever is needed on either side, whether it's Svelte or Astro or anything else. And it just works easily. And I don't have to mess with trying to load those into my public folder or various other places where it's going to be sourced from.
Well, it's interesting because one thing that we're hearing popping up as kind of a buzzword nowadays in our space is they call it single source of truth. And I think what you just highlighted is exactly that. Because all of your stuff, your images, and as we'll talk about later, videos, they're all in one space, your URL should change, as you just mentioned. So that's where if you decide to move from framework to framework, or if you decide to blow up your site and do something totally different with it, or you want to use your images and videos in a side project, all of that's the same stuff. So, everything's in one space. So you don't have to pull it from all these various other places. So it definitely, what you're highlighting is oh, yeah, that makes sense why you have a single source of truth for all of your assets, images and videos, and you're able to use it for this project. So that's cool that you're able to use it this way.
Yeah, and it's made going from each of these frameworks so much easier because I never have to worry about that side of it, which is delightful for me.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I run into it all the time where it's where is that file or where is that thing? And in most cases, I'm well, it's in my Cloudinary account, so thank God. But in cases where I'm working with somebody that doesn't use Cloudinary as readily as me and Jen do, then if it's challenged, or does it live in Google Drive? Does it live in Dropbox? Is it, did you have it just referenced on the spreadsheet somewhere? So it's definitely where, single source of truth. I love the fact that you did this way.
Yeah.
Also, I gotta say, before we left that code page, I gotta say, line 22, I saw a to-do for Joel Turner. See if there's a better way to do this. And that felt pretty iconic. And that's part of why we have you back on DevJams, is because you found a better way to do something that you were doing before and added cool new features. But that's a pretty iconic to do. I'm glad that we kind of got a sneak peek into that.
Yeah, those are sprinkled all throughout my code. As I'm learning Astro, there's tons of little pieces that, oh, hey, maybe there's a better way for this.
Yeah. You're I've gotten this to work, but maybe there's a better way to get this to work. I'll deal with that later. Now I'm just focused on the fact that it works and moved on to the next thing. Exactly. So, speaking of moving on to the next thing, let's see about your videos that you've added to your site and the way that you're making that work.
Let's take a look at these real quick. This was more just an experiment of Cloudinary video. It worked so well with my images. I thought, well, if I start doing sketchbook recaps, it'd be nice to be able to put them on my site. It's more for me than anybody, but if anybody wants to see them, at least they're here. So I just have a few of them on here. At first, I was trying to work with Video Player API. My project wasn't importing correctly with that code base, but luckily, this also has iframe capability. So I was just using this little video player.
Yeah.
studio.
I love the Video Player Studio. We use it a lot too. Yeah.
It made it so easy to just grab exactly what I needed right here. And then I embellished the attributes on here just a little bit. We'll show that here. So I have a video player component that just takes in the public ID, title, and these are more for displaying the text underneath the video. Most of my videos have some sort of music that I have to attribute to somewhere else. So here I'm creating the parameters for the URL, and these are the standard ones that you'll need. You'll need your cloud name and the public ID of the video. So this allows each one of these to be unique. And then I saw in the docs that you can change some of the colors. So I've got, in this case, I'm using my kind of branded light blue for this. And then when you actually play the video, you see the blue underneath as well, which just kind of felt nice. It felt more integrated into the site.
Yeah.
And the neat things I'm seeing here, because me and Jen deal with this video player a lot. Like all of our self-paced coursework in the academy uses this video player that you're talking about. So some of the things I'm seeing that you're doing is that you are doing progressive download rather than use like HLS or Dash like this, which is great because honestly, I feel like we've gotten really good with progressive. But the neat thing that immediately I hope everybody saw was that when you hit play, it started playing immediately. Like there was no buffering or wait time. So it's a very similar experience to what you have with like more widely used services because of just the sheer breadth of they are, like YouTube. Like it's like that loads instantaneously, this should load instantaneously. So it's providing you that type of experience by running us through. I'm not trying to become a commercial, but it's to say like there's a lot of cool things that are happening here.
Yeah, and I noticed the same thing. I was expecting some sort of buffer time, some lag, but these aren't huge videos, but they're big enough that I would expect some lag. But yeah, they play very well, even off of Wi-Fi on my phone. They play very quickly, and that's another nice thing about the iframe. These all still work, even when it's iPhone size.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it so much easier to handle or have Cloudinary handle that than me handle that.
Absolutely. And the cool thing I like also about that studio that you were showing is that, let's say that you at some point say, I want to add, let's say, ways for people to jump like 10 seconds back and forth, or you want a way for people to speed up or slow down. Like there's all these little buttons and whistles that are baked into this, and they're always adding more to this. So it's slick. It's slick. But what I think is great about this is obviously you're a skilled developer, but it's to say I've seen people that are not skilled developers at all navigate that and get a similar output to what you're showing here. So this is great. A nice use case of this.
Yeah, anything that I can hand off to be optimized, I love. It's nice to not have to handle all that every time. But yeah, the iframe is really simple. Just add your params, and you can add some CSS. But I do have the little citation here just for the music. But
which is a good thing to do. You got to cite people when they make things for you. So I appreciate you doing that. So that's great.
Yeah, I just call that player with the public ID and made my video page very easy to create and get up there.
And so you're using Cloudinary to enhance your load times and optimize, like we just said. But I know Astro also is supposed to enhance these things. Do you know, and I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't know the technology that makes Astro work, it just works. But do you know how Astro is doing any optimization combined with what you're doing with Cloudinary?
I'm not fully certain. I know they handle some of the caching, some of the sizes. If you specify sizes, I'm still pretty new to their image component.
Yeah.
But when
Cool.
I started using it with the postcard, that's really just these cards on the blog page, and this was a case where I've had these at different sizes everywhere, different aspect ratios and everything. These images are normally way taller, but just through the transformations on Cloudinary, I can keep that source file that way. And yeah, just kind of reduce the height, keep it centered. And it mostly works for most of my images here.
Cool.
But that's all feeding into the Astro image component. So I built the URL, and that's feeded to the Astro image component, which also has the different sizes on it. So I have all these different sizes just for the different responsive attributes there.
Wow, great. So I know that we have briefly touched on that the last time we had you on DevJams, we were talking about the Instagram to Cloudinary service. We previously covered that, but now I know that you mentioned that you're using the Lambda function, you're using Val.town scripts. So let's take a look at that.
Yeah, definitely. Let me open up Val.town here. So the Val.town, for anybody that's not familiar with it, it's kind of a sandbox functions that you can create to do all sorts of things on the web. You can use them for webhooks or cron jobs or lots of different things. You can keep them private. You can share them. It's kind of a social community, so people help each other out or take somebody else's function and kind of riff on it and create something of their own. So I just have this main function that runs every 4 to 8 hours. In October, I have it running more often because that's when I'm doing Inktober and posting.
That's right, Inktober. Yeah.
But outside of that, I usually just have it run every 8 to 16 hours.
Okay.
And what it does is checks a latest timestamp of my Instagram posts. That's this little function down here. So it uses the Instagram lookup, pretty much using version 12. This is very similar to how I'm sourcing all my images, or grabbing all my images from Instagram. So this just checks to see my last post, what time was it posted at? And then if that is newer or greater than the interval time when this thing is running, then it'll go and send it off to my Lambda. So that kicks off the whole process that we saw last time.
Cool. It looks like you're using Dino.
That's the way Val.town handles their secrets now, environment variables. And I think that's changed a few times since I set this up.
Yeah, well, their to do is probably figure out how to make something work better too. So yeah, maybe they're changing things all the time.
Yeah, and
Cool.
honestly, this has been great. I'm not a big fan of going into AWS and figuring out cron jobs and all of that stuff. I'm okay with a Lambda, but having something recurring, it's nice to have something like this that can just trigger that. And I can run this on my own too if I ever want to, which is nice. If I know I just posted or something and really want to get it up on my site quickly. And then that Lambda, once it's finished and it has new posts, it'll call my website rebuild. And that's currently on Netlify. Just triggers a rebuild of everything.
And will that also work if you were to delete a few posts? Would that also factor that in?
Yep. any changes pretty
Any
much.
change.
Yeah.
I'm impressed, and I agree with the move personally. Like I like the choices that you've been making so far. Doing things with AWS Lambda, obviously highly reliable, because that's one of the biggest reasons I remember why you decided to stop focusing on Instagram's API driving your website content, because you were looking for reliability. So it's continuing to ensure, like, when I want my website's images to show, now there's videos too, it's going to do so in a very clean, reliable way. So
Yeah.
I can see like a lot of the services that you've been deciding to choose, whether it's the frameworks or things, it's tied around that in a lot of ways. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it is to say, like, to me, it has a theme or a throughput to it. And it makes sense. That's how I look at a lot of things in my life too. It's like, if it's not working, what's going to make it work? And it seems like you've made a lot of decisions along the way that continue to make your website performance really, really strong. So this is good.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely tend to move things from harder APIs, harder things to deal with, and try to just put them in a bucket that works, and makes it a lot easier, less headaches down the road.
So we've covered a lot of things here, Joel. So we've talked about adding videos. We've talked about moves from Next.js to Astro. We've talked about introducing AWS Lambda. We've briefly touched upon this blog cover images area. So there's a lot that we've explored. What are we missing? Is there anything that we haven't unpackaged? Is there anything that we haven't like delved into that you feel like, oh, we should touch this?
Yeah, one little thing on these cover images. Most of these I create little images for most of the newer posts, but I have a lot of old posts that I just didn't feel like were as strong. I needed to just generate something very quickly. So these are all using Cloudinary's text on image to generate these. So I have a postcard image that just has my avatar, my name on there. And then all of the text here is just dynamically created. And that's all happening right here in each postcard. If they have a cover image in their front matter from MDX, then I'll just use that, and then that goes straight into the image component. Otherwise, I build the transformation with the title on top.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really, really awesome. Now, one thing I'm wondering about that. So maybe this is a solution you've come up with something, but let's say that you had a really long title. Is it just where you prevent yourself from having a really long title, or is like, do you have it where it knows how to truncate it properly? Like, how do you handle that situation?
There's a few things that I noticed in the docs, that if you have crop fit, you give it a width and a height. I believe it'll ellipsify text. Whatever the perfect formula was, I tried to recreate it here. But I've done that in another project that seemed to work pretty well.
It's amazing. That's amazing. You answered the question perfectly. And we'll make sure we reference that doc piece as well, because you're right. Being able to add an ellipsis, because it's hard to know exactly what your character counts need to be, especially as we're talking about responsive placement. So I think being able to have something where if it doesn't work, add the ellipses is absolutely the right way to go. So this is really, really slick. And also, this is kind of tying into a lot of the things that we've seen people doing when we're talking about open graph images and other stuff along those lines, being able to take a lot of these core concepts and apply those into those spaces too. So I love the fact that you're doing this for your cover images when you lack a cover image. Very, very cool.
Quick question about, so I see in line 51 that data.title, that's where you're getting the title, but where are you getting that data from, or where is that stored?
Yeah, that's all coming from the MDX post. So that'll be like in here. I've got a whole bunch of front matter. So the cover image is really just the Cloudinary slug. Makes it easy to store, and then I can do any manipulations on top of that. I used to store the whole URL, but it's a little bit harder to break that apart and add all the different transformations. So it seemed a little bit easier to just do the slug here.
Yeah. Really cool. Is your stuff open source, or can people see this code? Amazing. Cool.
Yeah, I try to keep all my projects open if I can, if they're explorations.
Yeah.
Mainly because so many times people have poked through it and said, "Oh, this could be better. Here's how we did it over here." It's such a nice way to learn more and explore other parts.
Absolutely. Yeah, no need to keep it a secret if it's something that can help someone else and maybe they build something off of that and share it back with you and you can,
Exactly.
make your stuff better. Really cool.
Yeah, and you did mention the OG images, and I have to remember where I've got those, but I do have it building an OG image. So this is the base OG image here,
Uh-huh.
and that is big long URL naturally. But it's adding text just as digital adventure and the amateur illustrator, so that it's pretty similar to my postcard. But any other post will use the image if it has it, the post image, or it'll use that generated post title on the postcard image.
Very, very, very slick. And I'm seeing so much Cloudinary goodness baked into here as well, with the width and height and the overlays and the crop styles. So there's a lot that people can extract from this when they're trying to look at optimize their blog presence for sure. Jen, you have something. I can see it.
Yeah. I just was thinking, I think you mentioned, Joel, that you're using Gravity. Did I miss that part? Where you're using Cloudinary's Gravity
I
feature?
got to show that. So it's for all these existing images on the blog. I'm using Gravity Center and giving it a smaller height than the actual images stored on Cloudinary. So it kind of squishes it down to just the center of the image, which works really well for me. It kind of like cover and then just give me the center bits, like crop out everything else that isn't needed. I have this adjusted image size, which there was one piece that I was struggling to figure out on my 4K screen. It always looked a little bit blurry with Q auto and F auto. So I doubled the size and then resize it with CSS just to make sure that 4K still looks good. But maybe there's a utility that Cloudinary has that does that automatically. But this pretty much just takes whatever you input and doubles it there.
I mean, there's definitely ways to play with it. Like we have ways to manipulate the device pixel range or the DPR with certain things. There's ways that you can play with that. Like I've been noticing more and more like nice iPhones, Samsung devices, they can support DPR3 and whatnot. But in terms of the actual, like, do you want it to always display in a certain style? That's less common, but it is where I've seen it where we want variables that you put in there, say like display it at 4K or display it at DPR3 or based on device. So that's where I see a lot of like, what is it? We have SP auto for streaming profile, automatically for video side, DPR auto for the device pixel range side of things. So yeah, we have things that are baked in that way, but in the same sense, being able to do this, I mean, I got to tell you, in the world of me training customers for almost 6 years, I have barely ever seen anybody use Gravity Center with crop fill. So this is cool. It's not saying that's a bad thing. It's actually saying it's a good thing. It's a nice use case for it because it makes sense of how you're doing it. So I like the blend of transformations here. It's unique.
Yeah, it's really creative. And then can we head over, Joel, to your cover images to see what we're talking about? So this Gravity, is it just because you didn't want any dead space around these? Yeah, like up at the top.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So these normally are much taller. And this Cloudinary card from previous episode was the aspect ratio that I really like, especially for blog cover images. I don't need them to be huge. Kind of takes away from the actual title. So just compressing them height wise made it a lot easier. And then you do get more closer to the full size once you get in. And these I don't have the Gravity Center on right now, but I'll be updating that probably pretty soon.
I love it. There's so much to learn here. And I think the wonderful thing about this is that your repository is very easy to find. So it's simply just your name in this case. So if people are saying, I want to go check out all the code, all the things that happen to be there, if you simply just go to github.com/Joel M. Turner, you're going to be able to find all of that. And you can see, as I'm showing here, all of the website details that Joel went and showed here. It's all right there. And even his repo name is easy to understand because it's like, once again, his name, com for .com. So very, very easy to understand and go through it. And you can see the readmes. Also, one thing that I like about this, very easy to read, readme. So just lots of goodness here, but definitely, as you're pointing out, Joel, it seems like you're open to people giving you ideas, being able to share things for expansion or different things they could try out. So I think it's people can learn from what you've done, but also you're open to pull requests on some of this stuff too.
Definitely. Yeah, I've learned so much from the community, both at community Cloudinary and Discord, and Colby Fayog's content is just amazing for so much of this.
I agree. And it wouldn't be a DevJams episode if we didn't mention Colby. So I love the fact that he got mentioned again. This is because he does put out great content. So it's to say him, and then he's been getting more and more people to put out these DevJams videos that are very helpful as well. So yeah, I agree. I'm glad that you're learning. I'm glad that you're picking stuff up from us. It makes me feel like we're doing the right things here.
Definitely.
Excellent. So absolutely, as we pointed out, make sure you're checking, when I'm saying this more to the people that are watching this right now, but make sure that you're checking out the repo, checking out the site. And of course, as Joel just mentioned, he's actively involved with the community as well. So if you have any questions for him, make sure you're reaching out to him. I'm sure that you'd be open to anything that people have suggested about.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Well, Joel, I can't wait to have you back because I have a hunch that you're going to be doing more things. So hopefully this is just a part 2 of a part 3 of a part 4 of us continuing to highlight Joel's journey in development, especially when you start to bring Cloudinary along the way. We love to be able to highlight all the great things you're doing. We're very, very happy to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
See you soon, Joel.
So I got to ask, Jen, what was your big moment here? Like there was a ton for me, but what's yours?
Yeah, I think the change from Next to Astro is a big one to highlight because in Joel's case, it wasn't that what he was doing with Next didn't work. It was just that maybe it was more powerful than what he needed. You know, he doesn't have any integrations or anything that Next can help him with. He really just needed the blog to work in the ways that he wanted. And the big thing he said, which is the first reason why he said he was moving over to Astro, was this component island architecture concept. So where that only loads the JavaScript for these interactive components. So if you think about his blog, the different ways he wanted to display either grid view or list view, it wouldn't load all of that JavaScript upon page load. So that made a lot of sense to me for the switch. But it's also to say that what he's a self-proclaimed digital adventurer. Is that right? Digital adventurer. And that just felt like the perfect. I love that that's what he calls himself because it's a very common thing that we see with developers. They love to tinker. They love to explore new things. Or is it digital explorer or adventure? I'm not sure. Now I want to make sure about that. But either way,
it's both.
Yeah, it's both. It's both. So, it's cool to see what he did and kind of taking steps that weren't necessary to take just to learn more. And it seems like he might be applying that to his work or any clients he may have that he now may be using Astro with. Who knows? But I was really impressed with that. And I'm glad that we got to explore Astro in that way today.
And as I said in a few cases, this obviously is not a commercial for anything. This is meant to be educational, but it is worth people checking out Astro. I mean, it is interesting that we've had, a good portion of our episodes are now using this as their framework of choice for that project. So definitely take a chance to learn a little bit more about Astro at astro.bill is their actual URL. And it seems very easy to be able to work with it. So I feel like it's definitely something where if I were looking at building a new project today, I would definitely see what I could do with this. I think the thing that also is intriguing about Joel's project for me was that it is an area where when you're getting into content, a lot of times you have lots of images, lots and lots of images, but then you start to say, well, what can I do with video? So normally it's a case where I've rarely seen companies start with video first and not have images. It's either you go have videos and images at the same time, or you go with images first and then video becomes something that you do later. And that's Joel did the exact same thing where he loaded the images that he had for the illustrations he's done, bring those from Instagram into his site. But then he also has videos of his sketchbooks and they're really nice. So it is say if you are in a similar journey, whether you're a personal brand like Joel's, or you're a e-commerce site, or you're a travel and tourism site, you probably have a simple formula that you now can rely upon to say, how did somebody do this for this type of project, and apply those to your own learnings. So I think there's a lot here to show how do you make the foray from image to video and be able to not abandon one, but to augment what you have with this new medium. It's a very good way to show that's kind of a similar journey that others have taken.
Absolutely. And also, it's a good reminder that if you haven't seen something done a certain way, let's just say, for example, using gravity center with a fill crop, that's something that maybe Sam and I hadn't seen exactly in that way. And even, I could tell that both of our wheels were turning, and it just goes to show creativity. You combine creativity with certain technologies, you can come up with something that no one's come up with before. And then someone else can watch this and think, oh, that sparks an idea. And it was inspiring to see that for sure.
I agree. So before we let everybody go, I want to make sure that everybody knows that they can always go to cloudinary.com/podcast to check out episodes just like the one that we had with our friend Joel. And when you dive into any of the episodes that happen to be there, note that if we take a look at any of the ones that are here, you should easily see that you can watch the videos in the recorded formats. You can always check out the transcripts and pop to any specific section of them, as well as find the links to the areas where you might enjoy watching these podcasts, whether that's YouTube, whether that's Spotify, or our own training portal, which is called the Cloudinary Academy. So make sure you're checking all that out. And as Joel, Jen, and myself have mentioned, our community is a great place to continue some conversations, whether you have questions, whether you have answers, or anything that you just want to ultimately discuss. That would be at community.cloudinary.com or our associate Discord server, which is also linked on that same site. So, Jen, any final thoughts before we let our audience go for their day?
My final thought is I hope we get to see Joel again on DevJams. We'll see.
Yes, me too. So on behalf of everybody at Cloudinary, me and Jen want to thank you for taking part in this episode. And we can't wait to see you back for more DevJams episodes, where we will be talking with other developers, baby Joel again, but other developers who are doing inspiring, innovative, interesting things with images and videos inside of their projects. Take care, and we'll see you at the next one.